What is going on, YouTube? Welcome back to Fireside Rangers, the show where our content remains consistent, but the outfits we wear do not. Today, we are going to be talking about a question that the Rangers defensive core may or may not have. You look at most of our top players, they're almost undoubtedly going to be in the lineup. We'll have Lindgren and Fox. We'll have Miller and Trouba. We'll have Schneider. And then most major hockey outlets project at this current point in time that Zack Jones will be sliding into the defensive core this upcoming season. But, summer's not over yet. There is still preseason training camp. Anything can happen. And the Rangers do also have Chad Weedle, a veteran defenseman, in their system. So the question kind of boils down to, what does Peter Laviolette and the Rangers organization prefer? A younger prospect, almost like player, as in Zack Jones, who they could hope to have a breakout season up in the NHL, or rely on an older veteran defenseman who has a little bit more stability in his career, but might not have as much upside as Zack Jones. So we're going to get into this discussion, share how we feel, and maybe dive into a little bit of a debate. But before we do that, make sure you guys like, subscribe, ring that bell so you don't miss notification. Leave your thoughts on this topic down in the comment section below. Also, let us know how you feel about our fits, because they are something today. Lastly, be sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms at Fireside Rangers. But before we really get into it, Colin, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm good. I'm good. I was talking with a client today at work, and he was telling me that hockey is back, and I know it. But when other people start to talk about it, it just gets me giddy. I'm excited to talk about this topic because this is one that I've kind of been thinking about for a little bit now. I've always been a big proponent of the other guy. I like Zack Jones, but I like this other defenseman a lot. I don't know if you mentioned him yet, but let's get right into it.
Yeah, Chad, bro. So I know you're big into this topic. You're the one who recommended the topic for today, so I'll let you do most of your giving your argument to start off, but I'll just preface it by saying I'm on the side that prefers Zack Jones. I think, to me, if I were the coach of this team, undoubtedly 1,000%, no matter what happens in preseason, training camp, everything, I'm still putting Zack Jones in. It's about time he gets his shot up in the big leagues. We've seen a lot of potential from him. He's came in and had clutch moments. Look at last season when Jacob Trouba was injured for a significant amount of time later in the year. Jones got a lot of playing time, looked really, really good. I'm big on him, and I'd love to see him play a full season with the Rangers. So that's just my stance on it. But apparently you feel otherwise. So I'll pass it off to you, and I'll hear out your arguments.
So I like Zack Jones. He's only 22 years old. He's a player that I enjoy watching play. I think he has a lot of upside. But I really like Chad Weedle. I like when we acquired him from the Penguins last year. And I like that we brought him back on a really cheap deal this year. I think if you're looking for a guy who can really shut down opposing teams, he is a good depth guy you can trust to go and do that. If you're looking at the D pairs, it's most likely going to be Fox and Lindgren because they're inseparable. And then after that, it's all kind of dodgy. But Miller and Schneider put up some pretty good numbers down the stretch. I thought they looked a lot more better than any of the other combinations. And then you had Trouba with Gustafsson. Obviously now Gustafsson has left. And while I said I like Zack Jones is a very offensive-minded defenseman. And as we've mentioned in previous episodes, and I'm going to bring it up today, again, we don't really need that. We have a lot of guys who are trying to do both, whether it be Fox or Miller or Trouba. They're all those are our offensive defensemen. Even Schneider kind of joins the rush a little bit here and there and pops a goal every now and then, but he's not as offensive-minded as those guys are. Whereas Chad Weedle could provide a little defensive stability if he's going to be paired with a guy like Jacob Trouba, or maybe, if he's paired with a Braden Schneider, you got a 1-2 punch on that third pair that you could really put out there and trust in not in the crunch time, but to give Fox and Lindgren a little bit of a rest.
Did I just hear the words Trouba and trust in the same sentence?
No. That was Schneider and.
Okay, I'm glad I misheard. I was going to say.
But I'm saying even with Trouba, I feel like I trust Weedle more with Trouba than I do with Zack Jones and Trouba, just because you're putting two offensive-minded defensemen out there. At any point, I wouldn't really love it. I like to have one guy who's kind of a sit-at-home guy. And also, not to mention, Weedle has been around the league for quite some time now. He broke out, or he made the league in 2012, according to Wikipedia here, assuming I'm not misreading it. But it's a long time to be in the league. He's won several cups with the Penguins. So he's got that playoff experience, and he knows what it takes to win. Obviously, like I said, he's not known for his points, but he can also chip in occasionally. I think his best season was 21-22. He had 13 points, 78 games, which from a third-pairing defenseman, I'd take all day. Just because, like I said, he's not getting a ton of minutes, but if he can contribute here and there, that's more than fine by me. But mainly, I'm just focused on his defense, and he seems to have pretty good defensive numbers and metrics all the way around. So if I'm looking to pair anybody with Trouba, because somebody's going to have to do it, I don't know that I'm going to want to put another offensive-minded defenseman next to him. It didn't really work out well with Gustafsson, and I don't know how well it will work out for Zack Jones. And then I also don't know how that would hamper his development and confidence as a player if he's constantly going out there with a guy like Trouba who didn't finish the season strong and was out there for a lot of goals against. If now you as a young player are out there with him for a lot of goals against, is that going to affect you mentally, and are you going to start to blame yourself, or is it, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of other aspects that you have to look at. So for me, you know what you're getting with Weedle. He's been in the league for a while. He's already kind of developed how he plays his game, and he's not going to really let any play on the ice really affect him. Whereas a young player, young and impressionable player like Zack Jones, might be affected by a lot of the negatives that could come with playing with Jacob Trouba, and especially in this big media market, just seeing any slander towards that third pair, it could, hurt his confidence greatly. So that's my take on it. I know I've yapped for quite some time now, so let's see if I've changed your mind at all.
As always, it appears that every issue we have in the defensive zone boils down to the fact that Jacob Trouba is on this roster. Right? Because I feel like every part of your argument was like, where do we put him? Because you don't want to put this guy with Trouba, but you don't want to put that guy with Trouba.
Yeah.
And I think that's funny because we all know how this channel feels about Jacob Trouba at this current point in time in Rangers history. But no, you make some valid arguments, right? Because the pairings are important. As much as you like an individual player, like how I like Jones, is Jones what this core needs right now? Because we do have a lot of offensive-minded defensemen, right? You have Adam Fox, you have Keandre Miller. I don't know, and this might just be me. This might be a hot take, but I don't know if I would consider Trouba to be an offensive defenseman. I think he's just like a physical defenseman who foolishly takes it into the offensive zone sometimes.
I think he used to be an offensive defenseman who unfortunately no longer has those capabilities.
Yeah, he doesn't. The only capability he has.
He still thinks he is.
So I don't know. I lost my train of thought now. Oh yeah, Jacob Trouba. Do I consider him to be offensive? Not really, but he's definitely not defensive. I'll tell you that much. So the pairings do have to come into play. I think obviously Lindgren and Fox are going to play the whole season together like they always do. I was a big fan of the Miller-Schneider pairing last season. I think that did really, really well. And then what was it, Gustafsson-Jones when Trouba was out, and then it became Trouba-Gustafsson. So I guess the pairing would be in an ideal world, Jones and Trouba, which I don't know if I trust very much because I don't trust Trouba, and I don't know if I trust someone as young as Zack Jones to be playing alongside Trouba. The only way I can see it working out is if maybe you have somewhat of a complete offensive pairing in Keandre Miller and Zack Jones, and have Zack Jones kind of just tone it back a little bit on his offensive play. And then we can see Trouba and Schneider again, which they did play together a little bit last season, if I am correct. And from what I remember, it wasn't a very impressive showing. But maybe, who knows, maybe Trouba's going to come out and turn over a new leaf. That was going to be my episode idea for today, was can Trouba turn it around this season? But then you're like, no, let's talk about Zack Jones.
Too, that Zack Jones is he's relatively small. I can't find it on Puckpedia because I'm not there yet. There it is. He is 5'10", 179, so he's not the biggest guy out there. And that definitely, not that Weedle is that much bigger, but 5'11", 192. He's got a little bit more meat on his bones. And just like I said, he knows how to play the game. He's been in the league for quite a while now. Zack Jones, I feel like early on in the season, they've used him a little bit. Then he went out he went back down to the minors for a little bit and then came back up and had a good showing. But I feel like early on he was getting just manhandled in front of the net. And I know what people are going to say. They'll be like, oh, Fox is undersized. I said that about Fox, and look at him. But Fox is such a different player than Zack Jones. Fox kind of all the tools and then sharpened his game. Zack Jones is still so young and just hasn't really – he's not polished yet. Like Fox is way further along and has kind of acclimated to the NHL game, whereas Zack Jones is still figuring it out. So do I want to put a guy who's trying to find himself in the league and figure out his game with an anchor like Trouba, who every partner he had last year kind of took a dip when they were with him, and then when they played with somebody else took a step up? Or do I want to put a guy who's been established in this league, has been not a shutdown guy, but like a good defensive defenseman who I trust a little bit more and other teams have clearly trusted him enough to put him in spots where, to the point where he's won a cup or two. Do I trust that guy more? And for me, it's just the experience and just we know what we're getting with Weedle while Zack Jones. And I love the kid. Obviously, I hope he gets a shot at some point down the line. Maybe next season when we trade Trouba, if that does happen. I know everybody's tired of talking about that, but if that does happen, I'd love to give Zack Jones a shot and whatnot. But I just don't think if you were looking at being a contender this year, that putting him in the lineup gives you the best chance to win night in and night out. But that's just my take on it.
Yeah, I mean, you make really good points. Like, I'm not going to sit here and disagree with you because you're right. And my only thing is that I just look back to last season and that one stretch when Trouba wasn't in the lineup and Jones had an incredible stint up in the NHL. Like, I think he was one of the best looking defensemen on this roster during that time. And there's a part of me that feels like, a year later, I mean, well, not a full year, but like the next season after another whole off season of training and developing, maybe he'd be able to replicate that in a lineup that does feature Jacob Trouba, even if he's paired with him, even if he's paired up with someone else like Braden Schneider or Keandre Miller. But I don't know. We'll see. I think chances are, no matter what plays out, I think Jones is going to be on this roster day one, just from like a realism standpoint, whether he should or shouldn't be. I think that, like, if you're a betting man, put money on the fact that Jones is going to be on this roster for game one. So I don't know. We'll see how it plays out. I think both defensemen bring pros and cons. I mean, I haven't even really touched upon cons from Weedle because there aren't that many. It's just like he's kind of old. That's like that's
a little bit. He doesn't really give you that much more height than Zack Jones does. It's just the fact that he's so long and kind of knows a little bit more of what it takes as opposed to Zack Jones and how he handles the net front and things like that in his battles. Like, he's constantly getting worked over a little bit, whereas Weedle knows how to use his size. And like I said, I've said it before, I'll say it again. I like Zack Jones. I think that Weedle is a really good depth guy, even if Zack Jones does get the opportunity. And I'm not opposed to him getting some looks. I just hope that if it isn't going well, that we're able to make a change if necessary. And that's my big thing.
I think no matter what happens throughout the course of the 82 games, we will surely see both suit up as a Ranger for like more than one game each, like fingers crossed that it's not an injury or anything that causes it. But I think at some points we'll see Jones in the lineup. I think at other points we'll see Weedle. I think Laviolette likes to work with options in his rosters. Like, we look at last season, our bottom six was changed quite a bit because Laviolette had so many pieces to move around. He had Rempe, VC, Edstrom, like a bunch. And I'm sure having that in the defensive core is going to be utilized as well this upcoming season. So we'll see how it plays out. I think I'm still on Team Jones, but I went from like 100% certain to like just confident. Like, so you make good points, but not enough to sway me fully. I'll be satisfied either way, though. That wraps up my thoughts. I don't know if you have any closing remarks or if we're good to wrap this thing up.
I'll say my last thing is I wouldn't really be disappointed if either of these guys are on the team. They're both good and solid players and options. Zack Jones is young and he's got a whole, hopefully, great NHL career ahead of him. And I'm not trying to bash him or say that he shouldn't get that opportunity if he does play better than Weedle in camp. Obviously, there's a whole lot left of this offseason. We say that, meanwhile, games start, I think, in like a week and a half. But there's a lot of time before even the preseason starts, and then he can still make a name for himself there. So there's a lot of time left for Jones to go out and kind of prove to this coaching staff that he's better than Weedle, or vice versa. Either way, I think that they're both going to be good. I just think that one could be better than the other, but I won't be dissatisfied either way.
Valid. Before I wrap it up, had to switch back to the franchise that this channel is actually dedicated to. If you're wondering about the Hawks jersey, still it is a Patrick Kane jersey, former Ranger. So I think it applies. But that about wraps up today's episode of Fireside Rangers. If you guys did enjoy and would like to see more content, please like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you don't miss notification. We had I think it was a pretty solid discussion. There wasn't that much arguing, or we both went back and forth and had differing opinions. So it wasn't just us agreeing with each other the whole time, which is nice to see sometimes. So we are curious to know how you feel about it, though. So leave your thoughts down in that comment section below. Lastly, be sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms at Fireside Rangers. But have a good one. And let's go Rangers.